Let me start with thanks, because this occasion, this way of sharing and engaging with each other doesn't just happen. It's the result of a huge amount of personal investment by very special people who share your commitment to the journey and the destination. And I'm not going to name them all because I don't want to draw too much on the fact that we're all in this together, and I'd have to go through the list of all 400 or 500 of you, because you're all responsible for the success that Rising is beginning to feel. We've had some very special people that have joined us, and on your behalf, I will write to them all personally in the goodness of time and just explain to them what a difference they made. Our 70 or 80 contributors, amazing team. This year we've had Creative Connections. They're still working. This is an amazing catalogue of our discussions, and I'd urge you to look at those. And the commitment I'd give to you early on as a recognition of the value of the work that they've done, let's make some postcards. Let's make some Christmas cards and birthday cards, and let's send them to you all and use them. Remember the moment you experienced, an inspirational moment here in Rising. Send it to your grandma for a Christmas, or to your children or brothers and sisters for their birthdays. Happy Easter, happy Hanukkah, whatever. We'll try and create some product from these conversations, this record that we can share. And every time you open your drawer to send someone a note, think about the conversations that will still be going on, as we've heard. I'd like to thank Kieran Norris, our new director, and his team for the patience with which they've struggled against all deadlines to make this happen. And I'm really grateful to them to manage to achieve this, our dream, your dream, against all the odds and without sufficient resources. That's always the case. That will not stop us. We will continue to build Rising. It's twice the size and twice the value this year as it was last year. Just wait till next September. So the promises I gave were that we'd listen, and there are three important things and I've been at most of the sessions I could get to, and I've interrogated those where I wasn't able to be in two places at the same time. What I heard as a simple academic, as a humble participant, and what I will mobilize on your behalf in our development of our post-Rising 16 conversations and the building of Rising 17. I've heard a lot about the role that identity plays, who we are, who our neighbours are, who they think we are. This is a theme that some of our research is focusing on. But actually, what I've heard also from many of the sessions was a challenge to us about stepping back from who we are, stepping back from our identity and thinking much more about our behaviour, how we behave. And it's a theme again in our research that we need to focus on and develop further. And I've heard that over and over again, validating some of the academic work that's going on in this centre, the Centre for Trust, Peace and Social Relations, and many others. Validating also the sermons that are preached here in the cathedral, this amazing place. And my real thanks to John, Sarah and the team, to Bishop Christopher, for allowing us to share this as part of our discussion. It's as important as you are in many ways. We behave differently here. One of our challenges I shall come to is that we have to behave differently when we leave here. So identity and behaviour I've heard a lot about, and I think we need to explore that and focus on that carefully in forthcoming discussions. I've also heard a lot about inclusion. And we make no apologies at all for the focus that has grown in Rising 16 on the way in which we globally, our humanity, deals with women, girls and children. No apologies at all. This is something that we can deal with, and we know, and our discussions have focused on what we need to do, how our behavior has to change, how we must look differently at humanity. Through different lenses, through grown-up lenses, we can learn to change, and we must. Have a look at the graphics I went through before. They tell you what we discussed and what we concluded. So no apology about our focus on vulnerability, and our focus on the structure, the social and economic structures that are promoting a continuation of things that we know are intolerable and have no place in a civilized world. And a lot of what I heard was about a theme that we're really focusing on in the next period in our scholarship, about leadership. Not just about leadership of how societies build or how communities behave, but leadership that's related directly to peace. And this isn't about nation states and United Nations, important as it is for countries to be recognized. This is about mobilizing all people as leaders of peace. There's a lot of literature about leadership that talks about followership, which I was always quite amused about. And I'm an academic that challenges the concept of followership. I don't want to be a follower. I don't want anyone else to be a follower. I want us to grasp the responsibility of being a leader. I visited recently the Carter Center in Atlanta, President Carter's wonderful center for peace and interventions. His ripple effect is huge. He's 92 years old. He's like dropping boulders into ponds, and the ripples that go out. He sends teams to difficult places to monitor elections, to promote democracy. He hosts the difficult conversations that we've talked about, the dialogues. He mobilizes the arts as a form of bridge building. Above his office door, he has, and most of you will know this because you're all believers anyway, he has two words: waging peace. And I said to him, that's peace leadership, isn't it? Instead of waging war. And, our great friend from International Alert, who reminded us of the 250 times more that's spent on waging war than is spent on development, on meeting the needs of the vulnerable and waging peace. What would waging peace look like? Do any of our politicians, and we've had great representation by politicians, former presidents, leaders, how well trained are they in preparation for waging the peace? I don't think we do that at all. We certainly brief them on how to wage war. That's not a problem. Secretary of State for Peace, do we have one of those? Do we have a ministry for peace? So we're going to look at that, and we're going to not get tied up in simply looking at nation states' leadership, but looking at the responsibility we might all have, leading our communities, our families, leading our nations, our regions into more peaceful places. I want to finish by a few commitments. I've had a lot of feedback over the last 2 days, and it's really welcome. And you know where we are. And keep talking to us. Tell us how we can do this better. Tell us what you liked. We could certainly be warmer. So don't have to write me about that. We know all about that. But some of the criticism is quite interesting. Some was that we don't have enough dialogue, that we have a lot of presentations and not enough discussions. So we're looking at that, and we'll look at that in the future. But I went back to our original concept for Rising, and maybe we should refresh that, or we should remind everyone about it. It's hugely difficult to bring 400 or 500 people together and have really engaging conversations. We know how important it is, but it's hugely difficult. And with the limited window we have, with the limited resource we have, we took the decision in 2014 when we launched Rising as a partnership between this wonderful cathedral, this amazingly progressive city, and the university. We wanted to develop a way of sharing complex stories in simply simple ways. How many complex stories have you heard over the last 2 days, presented in very simple ways? So we have wanted to bring together people who could share their insights and share their inspiration. And sometimes presentations do that very effectively. And sometimes dialogue is a way of exploring the consequences, the ripple effects of those insights and inspirations. So my response to those who want more dialogue is the challenge to go out and leave here and talk. The session earlier today concluded that we should talk to people who don't think like us. And it made me reflect on who's in the room, who's been in the room for 2 days. We're mostly people that share a lot of values, a lot of purpose, and that think in the same way. Maybe our greatest challenge is to be inspired, to listen to stories, to listen well, and to go out of here and talk to people who don't think like that, and who don't share all those values, and not be afraid to talk to people, and find ways of doing it in constructive ways rather than negative ways. And that came across very powerfully in our memories of Jo Cox and her style of working, and yesterday as well. I think we can sign up to making commitments as people to what we do when we leave here, our behavior. And so let me give you a few suggestions. Get your pencils out, it's the teacher in me, and write them down. There'll be a test next year. So first, I've mentioned already, let's go out and deliberately talk to people who we know don't think the way we do. Not in a belligerent way, and not in a way where you're seeking to persuade. Dialogue, and the most powerful dialogue, is where you simply encounter someone, you exchange views, and then you begin to engage. You don't have to have dialogue that's destination is agreement. Sharing is very powerful, and a lot of you have said that in a lot of the sessions. Secondly, we have a duty, because we're all on board, because we've all bought in. I suggest to you that we have a duty to use our capability, use the competence that we have, the knowledge that we've shared for good, and not in a negative way. Let's go out and be prepared to make a positive change because we're experts in something, because we're committed, because we understand our competence. Let's mobilize what we know for good. Let's use dialogue in the way that good technology is used these days. Think about technology. The best technology is disruptive. It changes things. So why don't we have a concept of disruptive dialogue? Let's not just talk, as we've said, to people who agree with us or about things that are easy. Let's disrupt a bit in our discussions of dialogue. Let's learn how to do that in a helpful way, not in an angry way. Wonderful quote came up from one of the sessions about anger being someone who drinks poison and expects the other person to die. I loved that. It's on one of the boards up there. Another very powerful suggestion was about imitation. You'll recall from yesterday, a wonderful presentation that looked at the psychology of relationships and how powerful imitation is. My good friend, Lord Alderdice, I always have huge lessons when I sit and listen. Let's imitate. Let's find role models, very strong role models. Let's be role models where we get the opportunity. And let's imitate. And let's take a commitment to some of the values that were implicit and directly presented in those conversations. I heard people saying that we needed to take honesty as a core activity, be truthful. We had it again this afternoon. I heard the importance of integrity, of intention. And I heard a lot about transparency. And overall, my addition to that was I think we should be more authentic. We should take the sharing and the engagement that we have and be more authentic. Two other things that are also possible. I heard this wonderful idea that came straight off a discussion in one of the groups, the one in which looked at culture and conflict. Artists sans frontières. So let's take that idea. I know it came from a session, it just dropped off at the end. The thought of mobilizing artists without borders. Not as an expression of cultural heritage, but as an expression of exchange and sharing. How much is art tied into culture and heritage in quite a bordered way? Let's break it down. Artists without borders. Think about it before you enact, but I just think that's a brilliant idea. And I also heard about the role and power of education. From Malala's father, very emotional exchanges that followed. And the most interesting inspiration I got from education was not about curriculum for peace and for dialogue and dealing with people who are different. It was, could we bring up our young people in a world in which they were free and able to make mistakes? Could we educate for fallibility? So let me leave you with that. And my last reminder. I want you to be part of Rising on a continuous basis. Next year, we'll reconvene the Coventry Rising between the 7th and the 9th of September. We're doing it earlier, it'll be warmer, but we're also doing it early because it fits lots of calendars that mean we can really assemble the people we want. We did amazingly well this year, and the date didn't get in the way, but we want to remove all obstacles so that the real power of this forum is mobilized. And we'll ask you all back, and we'll expect you to be here. We would expect you, because next year's theme is responsibility. So we go from hope last year, the hard road, to the ripple effect. What we do and what we don't do has consequences. And next year we're going to focus on responsibility. And remember my comment about following and leading. This isn't about responsibility that other people have to do things. It's not about lobbying other people. We'll have a forum which looks at how we can take responsibility and how we can inspire others to take responsibility. How we tackle some of the ridiculous things, like the amount of money spent on arms, and like the growth of poverty in very developed countries as well as less developed countries. How we can take responsibility for the agenda that was set in the very last session on sexual violence. How we can step up and take responsibility on the mutilation of young girls. This is not acceptable, we've agreed. But we need to write down what that means for us in terms of taking responsibility. My good friend Abdul Mukti, who had to leave to return to Jakarta, said peace is not just the absence of war. I thought it was great. He's been reading his UNESCO founding documents, as others have. And I thought I'd leave you with that. The work that we are doing together, the work that we've done together these last 2 days, has been talking about peaceful relationships. Not just a state of peace, but peaceful behavior, one person to another. Rising was born and is growing stronger in Coventry, but you may have heard also that we're looking to take it outside Coventry as well. This year we had a wonderfully successful Rising in Northern Ireland and in Stormont, where we took the same concept of telling complex stories in simple ways, and we took it right to the heart of a fragile peace. We intend to take it to South Africa this year and to Turkey, we hope, very much. We're having all sorts of people who want to take the concept and replicate it. And we're quite relaxed about this. This is a good thing, so we're going to share it. We're going to protect its core values and its core concept, but we're going to share it. And I was driven also by Victoria, the most powerful, personally for me, contribution, Victoria, who told her story. And why don't we think of a rising local that takes a rising and doesn't take, white guys like me with all sorts of things that I've got to unpick before I can get involved. Why don't we just give rising as a concept and empower local people to do it for themselves? And we'll look at that this year as well, and we'll report back to you as that goes. So maybe we'll just give rising to a local area and see how they can use it as a concept, because I think it's a really good one. I'm bound to say that. I'm very grateful to you all for the patience with us. The organisation is always challenging, but you're part of it and you have such resilience. Some of you put up with all sorts of inconveniences, the cold, the dislocations. You found your way around the campus. I just congratulate you all for the belief that you have, because your feelings, your positive energy comes through to us and helps develop the concept and move it forward. I'll see you next year. Thank you very much.